Hello, this is Arthur Melman. I'm your host today on GGG Insights, and we're starting our first in a series of interviews with candidates for the Town Board of East Hampton. And today we have with us Bonnie Brady, who many people know. She's the Executive Director of the Long Island Fisheries Association, among many other things. Bonnie, you've been in the Peace Corps in Cameroon.
Yes.
You're a part owner of the Inlet Seafood Restaurant. You're this fishing guru. What made you decide to run for town board? I mean,
Well,
did you lose your mind or something, or what?
I guess you'll need to ask me after the election on that. Actually, my husband is one of the owners of Inlet Seafood Restaurant,
okay.
not myself, but I do work as the executive director for Long Island Commercial Fishing Association. I have been in the Peace Corps as a health volunteer. I was on the fire department for almost 20 years in Montauk.
Oh, wow.
I coached Little League softball, and now I'm trying to do this. So, yeah, it's a daunting task, but I think it's perhaps the time to be done. So,
What do you think your two or three major issues are going to be for Bonnie Brady personally? Forget what the party wants to do.
I mean, I've lived here for 30 years. So I moved in '89 to here. I spent almost 2 years in the Peace Corps, and then I came back.
Oh, so you were here before going to the Peace Corps?
Yes. Yeah, I moved here in '89. I actually came for a summer prior to that in '84 after I graduated college. I worked for the summer. But then I moved back here. My parents were separating, and so I moved back to give my mom a hand with my siblings. And so then I had signed up for the Peace Corps when I was working in D.C. for the senator's office. And so when I moved back, I'd gotten the offer, and I went in '91 to '93.
Oh, wow.
And as I was a health volunteer in the Gian Lobo area of Cameroon in a town called Bengbis.
Oh, that got you into the ambulance corps?
No, I actually joined the ambulance squad back in 1990. I went, and they were offering the EMT class in Mastic, so every Saturday we'd go. And then I did that first, and then I was still technically in the States, at least in EMT, so I was working at a hospital. I was working with primary health care in a hospital.
See, most of us know you as the lady who comes up and talks at the town board, and you're different from most people because you have facts that are real, and you've actually read the statute or the policy, and so you catch everybody off guard because you've got facts and you've got knowledge.
Right.
But what do you think, besides the fishery, we'll take it back. What do you think the 3 or 4 issues that are really going to be important to you as a candidate?
I appreciate you're very kind. I try to have the facts when possible. I think there's a lot of issues that are really important right now to year-round residents, and I'm one of them. In Montauk, I think we have a lot of issues specific to Montauk where there are changes that are trying to happen, but we haven't really been made a part of the conversation as much as we could. I think affordable housing is huge. In Montauk alone, we've lost about 200 people since the last census because people can't afford to live in town, whether it's apartments that they can just rent or whether it's actual affordable housing. Obviously, the issue for fisheries and overall for Long Island with offshore wind is a huge issue for us, and fisheries in general. Montauk is the largest commercial fishing port in the state. Other issues that I think are really important in general is just personally, I feel that the last couple of years when I've been going to the town board, I don't feel that there's been enough input from the community residents before things sometimes get baked. And so in the last, I'd say 2 years, we've had in Montauk, it was the Hamlet study, and we had the Army Corps of Engineer project, and we've had Deepwater, and I know I was recently at the music permit thing, and the thing with the substation over on Flamingo Road. It just is this constant barrage of issues that the residents, not enough eyes were on these projects ahead of time to offer a really well-sourced opinion as to how to move forward. And I think that some of those issues exist in the other hamlets also. So I really want to try to work to help those of us that choose to live here year-round continue to do so.
By the way, I think that I think the town has about 20,000 residents.
I thought it was actually 14,000 overall. I'd have to check on that.
What is Montauk and its environs? Do you know anything about that, or would you guess?
I believe it's 10,000 square acres, something like that. There are over 900 families that live there year-round. I know in the last census, about 30% of the population is elderly. About a third of those snowbird in the winter, and those that don't. I know some of this from being on the ambulance squad as far as the demographics of who's there. Let's see, I don't know. I don't have the exact numbers on the school. I would gather it's somewhere between 350 and maybe 400. But I do know that we have lost some families out of the district, you know, and I just know in general, I know when I moved here and scoring either seasonal housing or was great, but if you could get a year-round house, that was huge. And I've moved 3 times in the same year sometimes.
Well, my daughter has friends who bought somebody's crummy house for almost nothing in Montauk,
right,
which they use as a weekend house, and
right,
now, of course, it's become phenomenally valuable.
Right.
And that means that the person who would really be living in that house
right,
no longer has any place to go.
Right. There's been a huge amount of building and construction, and I don't hold it against anyone that lives there. If they want to move and they want to sell their home, that they should get the best dollar for it. But at the same time, those of us that are year-round residents, a lot of people, there are people that can't afford to buy a house. But the apartments, since Airbnb started and things like that, it used to be that people wanted to have year-round residents, like to rental, because at least they had someone in the house, they knew it was going to be taken care of. When the prices started to get crazy, a lot of people decided instead to go for the bigger bang for the buck and just rent out in the summertime completely. And so a lot of those houses were lost. And then a lot of the other houses where if the market started to get better, they just decided to sell them. So there's even less of an option. So for a lot of people that live there, unless they own another piece of land or they plan on leaving their house to their kids, they don't see the future as brightly for their children. A lot of children in Montauk, grown children now, have had to move away. They can't afford to come back and live in their town.
Well, is there any, I mean, I don't know enough about Montauk. Well, that's sort of part of the problem. I don't think there's, for a long time, there's been nobody in the town board from Montauk.
Right, well, we did, I can't recall how many years ago, Julia Prince was a councilwoman for one or two terms, and we had Bill Wilkinson, who was the supervisor.
That's about it.
Yeah, I mean, and even when things started to get crazy with the nightlife in Montauk a couple of years back, where it was really out of control, I know at the time, and people were saying, no one's listening to us. It did feel like, people, once they crossed the stretch, they forgot, and if things were, it's crazy, but no, just put it in Montauk. And so, the need, I think, for having a council member from each of the hamlets, I think is important. I think it's really important, because otherwise, people, I may not agree with everything someone says, and people are not always going to agree with me, but I think that each hamlet deserves to have its own voice.
Now, let's talk about affordable housing. I don't know enough about Montauk. I mean, I went down to Montauk Downs all the time, and I've had dinners there and lunches there. But are there areas where there is affordable housing built as affordable housing in Montauk?
I don't believe. I'm trying to recall. I mean, there is some Section 8 housing in Montauk that I know.
And that's where the federal government gives.
They subsidize, right? They take in. People have to apply to be on a list, and it's based on income. And then, if the owner chooses to, they will allow to rent to that person, and I think they then get a subsidy.
I happen to be a great fan of Section 8.
Right.
We used to have some apartment units out in Seattle that we had Section 8 housing tenants in, and it was terrific because it didn't force people to become ghettoized by income, and people would live together, and nobody really, except us, because we knew where the rent checks were coming from, knew who was getting what. Well, and it was a terrific idea.
I think, I mean, there's definitely, it's not just also for year-round housing, it's also, I know seasonally, a lot of the businesses, it used to be a lot easier to find housing. Some of the motels used to rent to them, but we've lost recently. I know Ann Breyer's cottages were just sold. Mark Rowan bought them from Durier's, and so a lot of the areas that normally would rent to summer people, summer workers, that's all drying up too. So I know there's been a big push within the chamber to try to find the ability, whether it's to bring what was an illegal apartment up to code to allow for renting, or if you're building a new site for whatever business that you have to provide housing as part of the qualifications. Because obviously, the business, we go from a town of just over 3,000 to, in the height of the summer, on the busiest weekends, which would be Memorial Day, Labor Day, and July 4th.
And St. Patty's Day.
Yeah, depending on the weather. But we go to about 30,000. Wow. I know that also from being on the ambulance squad. So it's, there's a big number of people out there, and trying to be able to put all of them into, and be able to get the help that you need, because if you don't have your help, you don't really have a business.
I know.
It's very difficult. So there has been talk about creating, whether it's some sort of apartment or hostel-like housing, or they had talked about putting in small, I know I saw this in the Hamlet study, they call it the condo with a K, which is kind of a portable front, but I don't know. I know the people that live in Culloden would not look forward to about 50 or 100 pods left on someone's field somewhere. But I think there are options. There's a lot of property. I think there's small pieces of land that have been bought by the town where the concept of, I think they finally did one somewhere where the idea is it's a multiple apartments in one larger house type of thing. I have said for years there are some buildings that were done down at the docks by the Royal Atlantic that are a series of, I think, 2 or 3. They're for rent, but they're typical to condos, and I think they're 1 and 2 bedroom sites. So you could do on a smaller site of land 1 or 2 of them and spread them out so that not one area was bombarded at the same time for a variety of reasons, but yet to allow maybe some people, and I don't know how, I'm saying this, as if I have a magic wand, because I don't know all the specifics.
It takes a magic wand to solve this problem.
Right, but some people just want to rent. They don't want to own a house. Some people want to buy, but maybe by having a reduced rent, they can then get that nest egg to do so. I think it should be an all options approach, and I'm not sure that that's really been looked at.
There seems to be this idea in the town of East Hampton that nobody should live in anything other than a house on a ½ acre or an acre or 2 acres or 5 acres. And it just doesn't make any sense, because you can't have, could people commute back and forth from Montauk to Hampton Bays? Of course. Well,
people right now commute from Hampton Bays and even further west to come into Montauk every day. I've talked to the girls that work at the IGA, and some of them come all the way from Riverhead every day, and public transportation, that kind of segues onto that, because I know there's been an attempt this year to create this train concept, and they've got the little hopper, that bus that goes around, but yet it doesn't, even for Montauk, it doesn't come at times that would promote going to work.
I don't know what its schedule is in Montauk, but I do know in East Hampton, the first train comes in at 7 o'clock,
right,
and the second train comes in at about 9 o'clock or 9:30. So if you're a teacher who starts work at 8 o'clock,
right,
you're going to have a long cup of coffee, or you're going to be perpetually late.
Right. No, the times, I think it was where, I know, because I know Fred Thiel has been talking about this for a long time.
Everybody has.
But yeah, there's a total disconnect. For most people that work, they can maybe get one, but they can't get back home. They can either get here, but they can't get home.
They have to leave by 3:30.
Right, exactly, or 3:10, and I don't know, except if you work.
It's 3:30 in East Hampton. It must be 3:10 in Montauk.
And so if you're, unless you're maybe a waitress doing a lunch shift, that's the only job that would qualify. And when I first moved out here, there was no bus service at all. I mean, it was they were quite a junk. I had my my 78 Mercury Capri that barely got it down, through to get to the other side, but. Having the kind of bus service, I know they have a fairly decent, but it doesn't go down East Lake Drive at all. And there are a lot of people there's some smaller condos in areas there. There are a lot of people that work.
Now this is obviously a very subtle plug for your restaurant, which is
no,
on East Lake Drive.
No,
but I don't want.
But
it's not fair.
It's the idea in general is
it's ridiculous not to have things.
You want to try to make it easier for the residents, no matter. And I don't want to be just Montauk centric, because I'm sure these issues. I've been actually on the bus that goes around for Springs. I took it with my daughter when they were kids once. These issues are a lot of these issues are, when you pile them together, the reasons why year-round people are leaving here instead of raising their families and having their families stay here. And that's, I think that we need to really put a more focused effort on the people that live here year-round. And not that all three neighbors on either side of me are second homeowners, and they're some of the nicest people. I don't want to create some sort of alienation where, oh no, local versus non-local. I think everyone should have the same focus and be directed so that they. But no,
this problem with housing is just going to get worse, and I think the town has to take the step of saying we're going to have clustered units. And it's not a bad. It's not a four-letter word.
I think it depends on the level of density. That's why when I had talked about the place that was done down by the docks across from the harbor side down in the Culloden area, and they're low density. It was like 2 or 3 together. So if you were to take just that many, so that you figure your average family, if they have 4 people, 2 parents and 2 kids, so maybe that's 2 cars, and as they get older, a couple. But by limiting the density, but having the ability to have a couple of solutions, so that if they're very attractive looking, the same, and that way you could spread them throughout, so that it wasn't, even though you're increasing the density, you're not overpowering any one neighborhood, and you're not taking neighbors' houses and losing the value of their houses because you're just putting an apartment building.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that's something that there's a lot of builders, there's a lot of people out here that I think if the effort to really put that on the front burner, I think that a lot of solutions could possibly be found.
I know there's one builder in East Hampton who has some industrial property near the airport, and he went over to Springs Fireplace Road and had a really creative solution of like a small office building for contractors and people like that, and in the back were apartments.
Right.
And you came in one entrance and you came to the office building, and you came in the other entrance and you came into housing.
Right. Mixed use.
Yes, and he's very successful with a lot of projects. And I said, this is terrific. When are you going to do the next one? He said, not during my lifetime. He said, the town made it so difficult for me to do this every step of the way.
Right.
I just was insistent that I was going to get this done, but I'll never do this again.
Right.
And that's such a bad situation to find people like that.
No, and I mean, I know some people that work in the town, and I've heard horror stories, and I understand, I think there just needs to be better lines of communication throughout. I don't know, as far as I know from my experience going to the town board, when you get up there for public comment, there isn't often a question-answer period. It's not like you can say something and you speak about what the issue is, and then they say, well, let me ask some questions. There's not a give and take. It's more alienating. And I've gone several times, and I've other people, and I just don't find it to be a process that's really inviting.
It's not interactive.
Right, it's not interactive in a positive way.
You make a statement, thank you.
Sometimes it's interactive in a negative way, but I just feel like that there's a lot. I mean, I'm saying this now, not being there, and I may get an avalanche of things that I wasn't aware of. But I really feel that for my town, I think we are at the ever spoken about the tipping point as to the town that we love and maintaining that community. And that community is our business community, and those are the ones that provide the year-round jobs in this town. And Springs has the same, and so does everyone else. Yes, tourism is a huge part of that, but it's not the only part. And I think there's got to be ways. I've worked with a lot of people in the town in various things. I'm on the Natural Resources Committee for the Long Island Regional Economic Development Council, and so there were projects related to increasing tourism in the shoulder season that I worked with the other people that were there, Parks Commission and business leaders, and just a lot has to do with creative thinking to try to work through things. I'd like to just see a more. Like I said, I don't want to be completely Montauk-centric because each hamlet has got major issues. I mean, Wainscott's got issues with their water, which are crazy.
Sure.
And Springs in general, as far as in the housing issue and where there is, overcrowding. I know they've talked about. I think they're doing an addition on the Springs school. Right. And how to just bring in more people with the knowledge. There are a lot of. I've said this at the last meeting when we were talking about the Hamlet site. There are a lot of really smart individuals that, when given the option to work together, can come up with really great solutions. And I'd like to see the town be more receptive to that in general, not just hand-picked appointed committees where the solution is already decided before it starts.
Yeah, no, that's a very difficult situation to overcome. But it was funny because you said we're people with different ideas. I'm chairman of the airport committee, and it was set up a few years ago, and it was purposely 3 people who were pilots or in aviation, 3 people who were anti-noise, and 2 people who were neither side.
Right.
And 2 of the most vociferous guys on each end, anti-noise and aviation, have really come together and worked really well. Because they found that there was a mutuality of interest that nobody would have ever guessed. Because they used to write hate letters to the Star. I mean, this long.
I'm not sure, but I may know one of them.
You probably know both because they went. Each one could give and take. But surprisingly, that's just changed.
When I was a reporter at the Star for a couple of years also, and I covered one of my.
Was there any job you haven't had? I mean, you must get fired on a regular basis.
Yeah, no. I only lost one job in the probably 20 that I've had, and it turns out. Because at a year, you were fine. At a year and 1 day, they had to provide you with insurance, so they would whack people. And so it was unfortunate. No, but when I was working at the Star, one of my beats was the Montauk School Board. And so the majority of the school board are obviously people that have, parents of children. But there was always that one person, and I don't want to say by name, but there was a fellow that represented the senior citizens, and he was at every meeting, and anytime anything was happening as far as an increase to the budget, he was right there railing on it. And at first, people were like, oh gosh. But he satisfied something that was really important. He gave another voice to a differing opinion that wound up occasionally coming up with compromise, and that's it. When you have diametrically opposed sides, if you really try to work together, there are things you can work on. I mean, I know with fishing, there are issues that we work hand in hand with recreational fishing and or charter boat guys, and there are other issues. If it's an allocation issue, then we don't. But trying to find places where we both agree, and in general, where people agree to go from there.
I've almost forgotten that you're a fisher person here now. So let's talk about some of the fishing issues.
Right.
You mentioned one, allocation. What is that?
Well, allocations are in certain fisheries, the allocations are split between the commercial and recreational.
Now, a fishery is a big area.
No, a fishery is actually a specific species. So the fluke fishery or the black sea bass fishery.
Oh, okay. I thought it was geographic.
No. But at the same time, there are certain fisheries that are bundled together because they tend to swim together, as it were. So, like you've got fluke black sea bass and porgies that refer to that fishery, and there's amendments. Let's see. In 1976, the Magnuson-Stevens Act established 8 regional fishery management councils throughout both coasts that regulate their species in the waters from 3 to 200 miles.
Oh, so it's the council.
The councils determine what the amendments are, and they create fishery management plans for each of the various species. Yes.
Oh, okay.
And so it's a.
And how do you balance what the commercial fishermen want to do with what the sports fishermen want to do?
Well, luckily, for the most part, they are separate entities. Occasionally, if allocation wants to be relooked at, that's when things can get heated as far as, and because a lot of times, people make their money, their salaries based on how many fish they can catch.
Sure.
So it's obviously, it's very heated in debate. But once that goes off to the side, then the issue, except then we have state-by-state issues with commercial fisheries from different states, like the fluke fishery, where New York only has 7%, and states, Virginia or North Carolina, have got 27%, and they fish in the same place, but yet they're allowed to catch more based on
it's where the boat comes from?
No, it's based on a very poor historical landing data that created.
Or where the fish are dropped off.
Right, except
or had been dropped off.
Had been dropped off between 1980 and 1989. Right, and
so that hasn't been updated for 30 years?
No, but the problem was every other state, if you have a boat and you come to my dock and I'm in Virginia, you bring me your fish and I hand you a receipt and go, here's your receipt for all the fish you just sold me. And you sell them literally to me. In New York, because of the Fulton Fish Market and the train station, since the train came out to Montauk, fishermen have sold on consignment into what used to be Fulton Fish Market and now is the Hunts Point Market.
Oh, so you don't, it's not landed here, it's landed in Fulton?
No, it's landed here, but then it's shipped and now in a truck, not on a train, into Manhattan to various fish dealers who then sell it at auction the following day. So it's sold on consignment and then we get paid. I'll kindly pay you on Tuesday for a hamburger today kind of principle. So as a result of that, it's we did not have the same data that every other state had. So
now, how about deep water wind? I think you're wishy-washy on that.
Oh no.
Are you against wind?
I have
wind
learned
power?
so much more about wind and the electrical grid and electricity and utilities and batteries and onshore wind and offshore wind and fast ramp gas. I haven't dove into nuclear.
You got 40 seconds.
Okay. I don't believe that wind at an industrial level is effective nor has a good cost benefit for utility users. It's on average for offshore, it's 36% of what capacity is. So if it's 100 megawatts, only 36 megawatts is what you get, and that's a good day. In the summer, when we supposedly need it most for peak, it's only 26%.
Everybody who's always said we have wind all year out in Montauk, and it's a great wind area, but you're saying that's not really
they're
true.
putting them 14 miles offshore, and when you put steel in the water, there's these things called corrosion, and there's also these things when you put steel in the water, you get invasive species, you get biofouling. We can go on forever.
We can
I'm
go
sorry.
on forever. We got 1 second, but thank you, and really,
Thank you very much.
Seriously,
I
really,
appreciate
really
it.
a pleasure.
Bring me back just for wind, and
I'll
I'll chat.
Gosh, I know you. I saved that for the end because I knew you were really pumped up for that.